Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cougars Care Workshop 3. Hopefully, that's where you meant to be. If you didn't mean to be here, that's okay too. I won't be hurt by it, but that's what we're doing right now. Thank you, those of you that are here in person, those of you that are online. If you're here in person, hopefully you grab one of our little workbook thingies already online. Jordan is just sending it out in the chat for you right now as a PDF to grab it. So we're going to be here the next, hour and a half or so, hopefully talking about sadness and depression, which is a real bummer for a Friday, but hopefully some things that can be useful to you. My goal is that you walk out of here with actual useful, applicable skills to help yourself and help other folks, right? So you can give me the next slide, please. The three things we're mainly going to do today is we're going to talk about sadness and depression, like defining the difference between the two, and also talking about resources that we have available here, and trends that we see at APU. Like how are APU students generally doing? How are they working with their depression, their sadness, that kind of stuff. Then we're going to do actual stuff that could be useful to you. I've got three things I want to talk about: behavioral activation, cognitive restructuring, and mindful practices. And then I'm going to do a little bit of where you can go for support at the end, basically an ad for the counseling center, because they pay my salary. So that's kind of what I'm going to go for. As we go through, if you could swap to the next slide, please. This is being recorded, first off, as you heard this creepy Zoom voice say, but we're just going to record the lecture parts, the me talking parts, so we can put it up on our YouTube. We're going to do some breakout groups here and there to keep it a little bit interesting. We're not going to record any of that part. So for those of you online, those of you in here, don't worry about that. Some of you are probably here for maybe your Gen 100 class, or maybe you're here for some SONA credits. If so, make sure you fill out our form at the end. We're going to have a QR code to scan and you fill it out. We have some feedback questions we'd love if you put down answers for, but even if you don't want to do that, make sure you get to the end and put your name and your email address. We can make sure to give you credits for what you need credits for. Also, if you show up to 4 of these, we'll give you a certificate for your resume, that kind of stuff. So if you want to do that, make sure you fill out the survey as well. Next slide, please. We are going to talk about mental health topics here. We're going to talk about depression that involves harm to self, suicide, those kinds of things. Now, I'm not going to try and make this overly heavy on purpose, right? This is not. This is just a workshop. We're trying to keep it educational, keep it on the surface, but these things affect everybody differently, right? So if this is starting to stress you out, or if you just need to use the restroom, or somebody calls and you need to take the call, please just step out as you need to. Restrooms are right out through this door here. Also, please ask me questions as we go along. Any questions you ask usually are questions other people are thinking about as well. You can actually make this material applicable to you. I like to say that there aren't any dumb questions, right? Especially because some of us here are fourth year psychology majors, right? And some of us here are first year math majors. So there's a big difference in how much psychology stuff you've learned in the past. And I want to make sure this is accessible for everybody. So please ask questions. Also, I think that's all the stuff that I want to cover on that screen. I want to kind of start us off as we talk about this stuff, as we talk about sadness and depression. I think one of the other pieces that I've heard before, that maybe some of you are still hearing, or maybe not so much anymore, though, is the idea that, especially at a Christian campus like this, although we're in open enrollment, not all of us in here are Christian, I'm sure, but many of us are, Christianity and depression ought to be incompatible, right? You should pray about it more, right? It's a matter of faith. If you're feeling depressed, that must mean you're doing your Bible study wrong, right? And I think that is one of the biggest, most toxic messages, unfortunately, that gets wrapped up into the ways that we think about sadness and depression in Christian context. I have two verses that I want to cite for you here, right? The first, obviously, being my favorite verse in the Bible, right? Because it's the shortest. Jesus wept, right? It's here's, I guess the translation here is Jesus began to weep. This is from John, but that idea that if sadness and depression are bad, and if we need to be more Christianer in order to not have it, then why is Jesus sad, right? Gotcha there, right? So we know that these things matter, right? But we know at the same time, it is important to have faith-based like skills, and we know that God is with us in our experience of sadness, right? So that's why we got that quote from Exodus here, that God is aware of our sufferings, right? God is watching us, and God is hoping to intervene with us, right? And so this brings me on to kind of like more talking about what's the difference between depression and sadness. If you could give me the next slide, Jordan. Right. So if we know that sadness is part of life, but we know that God also doesn't want us to suffer, right? How do we square that? Right? How do we make sense of that? And so I think the important thing to talk about is how sadness is normal. Like you should be having sadness in your life. Not that I want you to have bummer days, right? But like it's a regular part of life. And if we're not able to feel like sadness, like we don't kind of have the full circle of like emotional like responding, right? Sadness also helps us sometimes, right? When you get sad, what do you want to do? Kind of like slow down, maybe curl up with like a blanket, or stay inside, right? Shut people out for a little while. Like those things are good because they help you recover, right? They help you recollect yourself. They help you, maybe you want to get a hug from somebody, get some social support, something like that, right? Those things are useful and helpful, right? And so sadness is when we feel that bad because of some specific thing that happened, and then we take care of that, and the sadness goes away, right? What makes depression different is it's when sadness kind of goes into overdrive, right? When it starts to impair like your ability to do your day-to-day things, or starts to cause you distress that's outside of the normal amount of distress that a person should be feeling, right? We call that in psychology, we call clinical distress or functional impairment. There's not going to be a quiz, you don't have to worry about that, right? But if you do take psychopathology, those are the things that you're going to learn. And so, like, we got a couple examples here, right? So if somebody goes through a breakup, right, and they're very sad, and oh no, what am I going to do with my life? Like that's normal. That's how you should feel. That shows the relationship that you broke up with, like, is important to you, right? Or if you go like immediately stop eating, stop texting anybody back, like stop going to class, right? Shut everything down for an extended period, like a month long, right? That's not normal sadness, right? That's sadness moving into depression, right? I got another couple examples you can give me the next one, Jordan. If you fail an exam, you should feel sad about it a lot of time. Maybe you're angry too, I suppose, if you feel like the teacher didn't give you a fair exam, right? But there's going to be a level of sadness there, right? But if that sadness moves into feeling like I as myself as a person, I'm totally useless, I'm totally hopeless, nobody cares about me, I shouldn't even exist, right? That's it going overboard. That's the depression, right? I think I got one more on there. You guys probably okay. That was the last one. I've probably given you enough examples. You get the idea already, right? So how does that look at APU? These are actually data from the National College Health Assessment in last year, I want to say. I don't remember the exact year. You could email me if you really care. I will email you back the specific reference. But this is National College Health Assessment data. And over the last 12 months, folks have experienced all of these things to a clinical level, right? So 37% of folks have experienced stress at some point that interrupts their day-to-day function or overly distresses them in their life. 31% anxiety. Depression here is 21%, right? Feel significantly depressed. And also, there's some other scary things here that go with depression, right? Suicidal thoughts. 26%, a quarter of students have at least one time in the last 12 months thought about not being alive anymore, right? That's intense. That's a quarter of people. We got about 40 maybe of us, 35 of us together right now. But if I round that up to 40, that means 10 of us, right? I think that's math, that's a lot of folks, right? And so when we think about these things, like we know they're real and they're normal in terms of normal, like people experience them, but not normal in like we want you to experience them, right? When somebody's feeling this kind of way, maybe wanting to hurt themselves or maybe even acting on it, 10% of folks have self-injured in the last 12 months. 2% of folks have attempted suicide, right? We want to understand and validate the feelings, but also help people not do that. Help people stay safe. Help you keep yourself safe. Help you keep your community safe, right? And so, you go to the next slide. That's what I want to talk about today. That's why I said I want to spend the bulk of our time on three actual tools we can maybe use, right? Um, I'm going to talk about three tools today, but these are like, I could lecture on depression skills for like ever, right? But it's literally Friday, it's Halloween, it's already a bummer to be here. I'm not going to keep you that long, right? I'm going to keep you an hour, I'm going to keep you 90 minutes maybe. But like, so I'm just going to highlight three things today, right? I'm going to highlight what's called behavioral activation. I'm going to highlight something called cognitive restructuring. I'm going to highlight mindfulness practices, right? And some of these things, maybe today, you'll be like, hey, I like that. And then other things, you'll be like, hey, that's weird. I don't like that. Okay, right? That's okay, right? The point to finding out how to cope with your sadness, with any potential depression you're feeling, is to identify the right tools and match them to the person you are, right? Each different person is going to need it. That's why if you ever see those BetterHelp ads on TV, they're always like, you can switch therapists at any time, right? Because like that matters. The best therapy that you get is just from somebody you can connect with. The best skills you get are the skills that work for you, right? It doesn't have to be, you don't have to use these skills necessarily. So big long lecture to say it's okay if you like some of these things, it's okay if you hate some of these things. If you don't like any of them, come schedule an appointment with me. I could talk to you about way more of them and we can schedule some more for you to like, hopefully. The first one, like I said, actually skip this slide for me. Let's go on to the next one. Behavioral activation, rational challenging, and mindful breathing, right? So what is behavioral activation? Next slide, please. How many of you heard, you've had to take like Psychology 100 probably so far. Maybe you took psychology in high school or, you know, maybe some of your psych majors, maybe you've taken a lot of psych classes by now. But you've probably heard somewhere along the line about like behaviorism, right? Oftentimes you have to take a thing where like, oh, like I'm Pavlov, train these dogs to salivate whenever they hear this bell or whatever. That's going to be on your test in January if you haven't taken that test yet. But the idea about that is like the whole school of thought of behaviorism, right? And it's one of the major ways that we think about how people are and think about how we can help them, right? It's basically if we just think about a person as sort of like a machine a little bit, right? What we are is just all reactions to our environments, right? This is simplification, sure, but like imagine if you thought like, okay, whatever happens to me, then I'm going to feel some kind of way about that, and then I'm going to kind of act some kind of way about that, right? And so from this perspective, right, like you could become depressed if the good things in your life, for whatever reason or another, stop happening to you in the same way they typically do, right? So for instance, moving to college, right? There's a lot of first year folks that end up getting sad or end up even getting depressed, right? Why is that? Well, maybe it's because you're in Azusa instead of wherever you were before, or even if you're like local and you're commuting, right? You're missing your friends from high school. They went different colleges or got different jobs, different places. You don't see them as much anymore. That makes you sad because you don't get as much positive feedback from them, right? Or maybe like you got to study a lot, right? Everybody needs to study a lot. Maybe you're hitting, you know, those junior, senior, upper level classes, like you're really studying hard. Maybe you're in like anatomy or something like that, where you're like really having to go at it. Well, that's going to take up all your time. The second that starts taking up all your time, now you're not doing those other things. You're not working out as much like you used to. You're not hanging out with friends like you used to. You're not doing whatever hobbies like you used to, right? Those things are taking away, again, important reinforcers in your life, right? Or a grief can be really well explained, I think, here this as well, right? When somebody passes away, we don't have the opportunity to connect with them anymore. We don't have the opportunity to speak with them, you know, in person and have their presence in our lives in a physical way, right? And so that makes us sad, that makes us depressed, right? So the problem is it builds on itself, right? So if you get sad because you're not seeing your friends anymore, or because an important person in your life has passed away, you start to pull back, right? You start to limit your engagement with other things in your life because you're tired and you're sad and you don't want to go out and do your workouts and you don't want to go out, you know, this weekend and go to a party with your friends or whatever it is, right? But now you don't have the reinforcement of those workouts. You don't have those reinforcements of that social contact, right? You know, you're starting to lose more and more things, and those make you more and more depressed, right? And it gets to be like a boulder rolling downhill, or like a snowball, right? You start the snowball at the top of the hill, and by the time it gets to the bottom, it's really big, right? I mean, this is a California school. Maybe some of you haven't been in that much snow, but that is how snow works. So that's how we get depressed. So what do we do about that? How do we fix that? Basically, if we could just add in more positive stuff in our life, then that would take the place of those positives that are missing, right? And then that would challenge our depression. That would help us get out of the depression back to normal sadness, or even help us deal with our normal sadness, right? But we have to like engage with something that's important to us. So if you give me the next slide, that's the idea of behavioral activation. It's just doing a thing, right? It's just doing something that you would like if you weren't sad, even if you don't want to do it because you're currently sad right now. It's forcing yourself to do something like that, right? Obviously, that can be really hard, but that's why you want to take little steps, right? So even like if you're super depressed, you haven't gotten to class in like a couple weeks, you haven't like left your room at all, like you haven't talked to any of your friends, right? Um, let's just start off first with getting you up and having you take a shower, right? Because that'll make you feel better, right? It's not going to make you suddenly undepressed, right? But I can't also just tell you, hey, immediately you person that hasn't left your place in forever because you're so depressed, immediately go be the life of the party or something like that, right? You got to just work up to it, right? And so just those tiny little steps. The other thing that's important to think about when we think about behavioral activation stuff is the different kinds of activities we might want to engage in, right? You could do social stuff, right? And social stuff is usually helpful because like being around other people is usually beneficial to us. But sometimes we can't like manage the energy for people, right? Like that's not something you can always do. Or also sometimes it's 2 in the morning and you're feeling depressed and like you text other people, but they're asleep, right? So you don't necessarily want all like heavily social stuff. But you don't also always want individual stuff either, right? Because if you're just only focusing on like I'm gonna journal more, or I'm gonna read my Bible more, or I'm gonna like listen to music more, right? You're not refilling that social battery. You're not getting that connection either, right? So you kind of need a little bit of both, right? You also might want a little bit of difference between like the intensity levels of the things that you want to plan to do for yourself, right? Um, Going on a run or going to the gym or something like that like is really good and the endorphins will help go up and whatever, but that's like a lot of work to do to be active like that, right? So maybe you also want some stuff that you can do while still like laying on your couch, right? Like and then like I said, listening to music or watching a show even or something like that, something that you enjoy. FaceTiming a friend, right? Like you can do that without having to go anywhere or do anything, right? And so it's good to have kind of like a balance of these kinds of things. The last one I have on there too is like deeply engaging things, like again, something like a Bible study or something like a deep conversation with a friend about how you're really feeling, right? And also stuff that's just distracting, right? Like, I don't know, watching a sports game or something, watching a show that you like. This is the 50th time you've gone through Friends on Netflix, but like we're doing it over again because it's your comfort show, right? Distraction is good and engagement is good. We just want to balance those out in a way that makes sense. Okay, that's a lot of me talking. That's a lot of me belaboring the point. Do we get the idea of behavioral activation? Fake it till you make it. If you feel sad, just go pretend like you're not sad, and eventually that'll start working a little bit for you, right? Okay, but obviously that's not the only tool we should use, right? So let me tell you about another tool, right, which is cognitive restructuring. You can give me the next one here. So cognitive therapists are, as you would imagine, cognition is thinking, right? So cognitive therapies are all about changing the way you think in order to help you feel better about some kind of thing, right? And so if you take some of the similar examples I said with behaviorism, behaviorism treats like a machine, right? Input, output, right? And so after a breakup, we're sad because we don't have a partner anymore, right? But if you think about it, we're not that simple exactly, right? That's a good way to capture a human experience, but it doesn't capture the full human experience either because like we also think about stuff, and the way we think about stuff matters for how we feel about that same stuff, right? So if you have a bad breakup and you think like there's nobody else for me, like that was my soulmate, now I'm crushed. Now I feel really sad. Maybe I even start to feel depressed, right? But if I feel like nah, forget him, forget her, right? Like there's plenty of fish in the sea, right? I'm gonna get back on the horse, right? Like that, I'm still gonna feel sad, but I'm not gonna feel devastated, right? And so that's the power of thinking, right? That's the power of how you view it, right? So the same thing if you failed an assignment in class, right? And you feel sad about that, but if you think like I failed this assignment, so I'm about to fail out of school right now, and all my hopes and dreams will be crushed, and my parents won't love me anymore, and whatever, right? Like that catastrophizing, right, makes you feel way more depressed than if you were just say like, that's really rough. I failed this exam. Like, I maybe even failing this course. I'm gonna have to retake it. I'm gonna have to pay to take it again. It's really hard to find that money, right? That's still rough, but it's not the same thing as my life is over, right? And then finally, like the example of maybe you do something you regret, right? We all make mistakes. We all feel bad about it. You might get depressed because you feel like you acted in a way that like didn't match with your values, or you feel like you let somebody down, right? But like if you think, oh, that makes me a terrible, awful person with no redeeming qualities, now I'm depressed. If that makes me somebody who feels really bad about it and who needs to go out and apologize, that makes me sad, right? And so that's what I want to encourage us to think about from a cognitive point of view, is that we want to think about our situations in ways that help us. It's very important to note, though, I'm not saying to be optimistic, right? All those examples I gave you, if you think about it in one way, you're sad. If you think about it in the other way, you're super depressed, right? Like, it's not about the power of positive thinking because that's going to get you nowhere, right? You can't just like pretend bad things aren't happening, right? Because you're not going to be able to trick yourself like that. And even if you were able to trick yourself like that, you were to say, no, it's fine. I'm failing all the tests in this class. Like eventually you are going to fail that test, right? And eventually bad things will happen. Things that you won't be able to just like rip away that way, right? So it's important to know that it's not about positive thinking. It's about rational thinking. It's about thinking in a way that makes sense. It's about seeing the reality for what it is so that you can respond to that reality in a way that's measured and proportional, right? So that you can feel bad if you need to feel bad, happy if you need to feel happy, like scared if you need to feel scared, right? But not overly of any of these emotions. Kind of making sense, hopefully? Okay, I'm seeing nods around the room. Thank you for your nods. So, next slide, please. I want to talk about automatic thoughts. So, how come we don't just view things helpfully? It's because we experience what are called automatic thoughts. I'm on page 5 and 6 on the workbook. We're going to naturally do some of these kinds of things because our mind takes shortcuts or our mind learns different patterns of how we want to think. And then we use those patterns over and over again. They become habits. In some cases, they become bad habits. And that's what causes us not to be able to see things rationally, right? So I've got a list of some here, right? All or nothing thinking or black or white thinking, right? If I'm not perfect, I'm terrible, right? If I don't get an A in this class, like I'm the worst, right? That's all or nothing thinking, right? Or sometimes a mental failure, a mental filter, like, oh, I'm the worst student ever because I got a C in my chem class, right? We've got like A's in all your other classes, right? Or let's do one that's not, uh, academics based, right? Jumping to conclusions, right? You might be mind reading, right? Like, oh, I'm at this thing and like uh at this party, this person didn't like come say hi to me, and so like that must mean they hate me. That must mean I'm bad, right? And so they're probably sitting there thinking, why am I even here? They're probably sitting there thinking like, I wish she would just leave right now, right? You don't know that. Like that might be true, but it might not be true, right? It's just making guesses about somebody else's mind. So they go on and go on. Emotional reasoning. When we feel like something is the case, then we just believe it to be the case without evidence. Or when we label ourselves like we're an idiot or a loser or something like that, right? Without full evidence of that. Generalizing, just qualifying the positive. I think that one's a lot. That's similar to some of the other ones. Magnification, telling ourselves unrealistic expectations like should or must. And then personalization is the last one, like making things your fault that aren't your fault, right? These are just a list of some of the most common types of automatic thoughts you could have, right? And as I'm reading them out, you're probably thinking of some of those that you do more, some of those that you do less. We all struggle with certain ones and not so much with other ones, right? And so the challenge with cognitive therapy is to challenge some of these, break out of some of these less helpful patterns for us. And if we can break out of those patterns, then we can see the world in a realistic light, and we can feel the normal amount of sad we would feel in a situation rather than having to feel depressed, right? Okay, next slide, please. If you've taken like a yoga class before, or even if you've done some kind of like prayer exercises, a lot of different ones like have some mindful elements to them, right? The idea of mindfulness is that like the more we hold on to something, like the worse that it affects our mood, right? Basically, that like if we're able to see our problems and just understand them and just not judge ourselves for having sadness or for being depressed, right? That can make it a lot less impactful, right? Because if we're sitting there feeling depressed and then we're judging ourselves for feeling depressed, right? Like that's going to make us more depressed. That like naturally makes it worse, right? Or like we're thinking about something that went, poorly in the past, right? That's something that we're sad about, and we keep focusing on that, thinking about that, focusing on that, thinking about that. Then like that's going to make us stay stuck on that. It's called perseveration, is the fancy psychology word for it. We're going to perseverate on that and not be able to get ourselves out of it, right? And so mindful therapies, the idea is that we get rid of as much as we can this perseverative focus, focusing on the bad. We get rid of all the self blame that we're doing for having sadness or for having depression, right? And instead, we try and just focus on the present moment in a non judgmental way that doesn't cause us to beat ourselves up so much, right? You can think about it like this, like hand that I've got here, right? If this was the thing I'm depressed about, these are my depression, right? I can focus really hard on it, right? And hold it up right in front of my face 24/7. That's obviously weird. You can't hear me or see me. It's like a weird way to interact. I can't interact with the world then, right? I could do the same thing if I wanted to push away my depression. If I wanted to not be sad, if I wanted to not admit that I wasn't doing well, I could just spend all my energy pushing this away from me as far as I can, pushing away from me, right? And I'm still not interacting with you all. I'm still got both my hands used up. I still can't see what I'm looking at, right? Because I'm spending all my energy either perseverating on or pushing away the things that are making me sad, right? Mindfulness you can think about is holding it in a different way. You've seen that I keep holding this basically down by my side as I'm talking to you, and I'll reference it occasionally, and then I'll hold it down back at my side, right? I still have these papers in my hand. So in this case, this is my depression, right? I'm still holding my depression. You can't just set that down because it's not just something you can set down. You can't just say, boom, I'm not depressed anymore, right? But if I hold it in a different way, if I don't spend all my time focusing on it or pushing away from me, I can still have a good life. I can still interact. In the case of this metaphor, I can still talk to you. I can still run a lecture, right? And that's the same thing you can with your feelings, right? If you are able to be sad and go to class and have fun with your friends and, read a book or go work out or whatever it is, the things that you're doing, right? You're able to have both and, right? But this isn't very easy to do, right? It's not a natural thing for us to do. It's natural for us to change what our behaviors are or change how we think about things. It's a lot different for us to try and relax in a moment and just be okay with what's going on, right? Especially those of us like we're here at APU. This is a Western academic context. Like it's not a very mindful context typically, right? And so it's not necessarily a set of skills that we all have as strongly as if we were potentially in a different context where we did a lot more practice with this. So, how do we do this? If you could give me the next slide, please. I want us to do a little meditation exercise together, right? So, I'll sit down here as I facilitate it, and we're all going to just do a deep breathing exercise, right? And the point when we're deep breathing is to let go of all of the worries and things that are going through our mind, right? You may be sad about something that happened earlier this week, or you may be nervous about like whatever your plans are for tonight. Like you got to get out of here on time, so you got to go meet up with your friends and do X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is that you're doing, right? You've got a lot of thoughts on your mind. Maybe some of those thoughts are depressing to you as well, or maybe some of those thoughts are anxiety provoking you as well, right? I want us to like take a break from thinking about those things. And the way that we're going to do that is by focusing on our breathing. And I'm going to be repeating a phrase. It's a Kyrie, right? It's an ancient, like, scriptural tradition from Christian traditions, like the Lord have mercy, right? Lots of prayers or songs and the Lord have mercy because it's a common Christian tradition. Again, I know that not everybody necessarily is Christian here, so if you want to pick a different word, when I'm saying Lord have mercy, if you want to think about a different word, like just like peace or still or calm or something like that, you can totally do that as well. And also, if you totally hate this exercise, that's okay, because remember, this is a toolbox exercise. We just want to pick the ones that work best for you. But I want to give us a try. So I'll invite you to find a comfortable spot wherever you're at. If you want to close your eyes, please do. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, just pick a spot on the ground and stare at it. We're going to start by taking a deep breath in and out. Deep breath in and out. And as we breathe in, I want you to imagine breathing in, Lord. Breathing out, have mercy. Focus on your breath, focus on the words. As much as you can, just let the other thoughts fall away for a few moments. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. As other thoughts come and push into your mind, that's okay. Just acknowledge that they're there. It's okay to think these things. It's okay to feel these things. Just try and gently recenter on your breath. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. I'll have us do this 2 more times. Breathing in, Lord, have mercy. One last time, Lord, have mercy. And when you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and bring yourself back to the room and try not to fall asleep on me too hard. So that's a mindful exercise, right? Maybe it feels a little weird. Maybe it feels like something you've done before. Maybe it's hard to get yourself into a mindful moment, especially in a classroom with fluorescent lights, right? But what I really hope you feel in that moment, right? I hope you feel just a little bit heavier right now, a little bit more grounded, having taken a moment to give yourself a break from all the things that you're thinking and worrying about, and just actively slowing yourself down and understanding that your stresses are real, they exist, they matter, and you can give yourself a little break from worrying about them every time that you need to, right? And that's the mindful way, at least part of the mindful way of starting to address like depressive thoughts and feelings, right? I have a script in here in your pamphlets if you want to use it. I didn't follow it exactly, as you'll notice, but I kind of vibed it. We also have a bunch of these on our website. So you go on the Counseling Center website, if you go on our YouTube channel, but you can also just like Google like mindful exercise and like stuff will come up on YouTube, right? So it's hard to lead ourselves through one of these until we have a lot of practice. So use recordings or heck, download one of those apps on your phone, right? I'm not sponsored by any of the major app companies, right? But like Headspace and Calm and like Stop, Breathe, and Think, there's a million different ones. So you can put in your app store mindful apps and find a free one on there and use it, right? I think they could be really useful to you, especially if you feel like they're connecting with you a little bit. So those are the 3 tools that I want to teach you today. And I hope that you can use them to manage your sadness. And especially you can use them to help your sadness not become depression, right? Because again, sadness is normal, but if we stick on it too long, that's when we get depressed, right? When you have a second, Jordan, if you could give me the next slide. But what I want to talk about is what do you do when these things don't work, right? I hopefully gave you the best tools in the entire world. You feel great about these things, you'll never be sad again, right? But that's not realistic, right? Every once in a while, we're going to get depressed, right? Everybody is, right? A quarter of folks in the last 12 months have felt significantly depressed to the point that they've considered suicide, right? And so, what do you do, and when should you seek more help, right? So, the thing I said before, right? Clinical distress or functional impairment. If you find yourself being unable to cope with your sadness at all, and maybe even engaging in dangerous coping habits, right? Like overuse of substances, that's a common one, right? People will drink too much or smoke too much or whatever, or people will engage in other behaviors that are bad for them, right? Or people may just like sleep all the time, or feel like their appetite goes away, they stop eating, right? Or just never get out of bed, right? Those kinds of things, they're impairing your functionality. That's the signs that you're feeling depressed. That's the signs that whatever you're doing right now is not working to manage your depression as it is, right? That's okay though, right? The other big one is, again, risk to self or risk to others, right? If you are having those suicidal thoughts, or if you're having self harm thoughts, or if you're cutting, or things like that, right? That's a normal part of the experience of depression. You shouldn't feel bad about it, but it does mean that you need professional assistance, right? It does mean whatever you're doing to manage your depression isn't working well enough for you at that moment, right? And so if any of those things are happening, please just come get help. Counseling center we have here for you. We have 24/7 available counseling services that are 100% free and 100% confidential, right? So they're medically confidential, just like if you went to a doctor or something like that, right? And so those kinds of services are right here available for you. Just reach out. So I'm Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm seeing students. Come book an appointment with me if you want, right? If you could give me the next slide, please. Um, we have also our student health center is around on campus. If the student health center would be useful to you, they can provide consultation around depression as well. So can our Office of Spiritual Life. They do our free pastoral, confidential pastoral counseling as well. There's also all these other kinds of resources available to you. If it's a class thing, maybe you need the Academic Success Center or the Accessibility and Disability Resources. If it's money thing, the financial aid services. Center for Reconciliation and Diversity provides a lot of services that help people feel like they're grounded and have community. Campus Safety is here as a resource as well for folks that are feeling unsafe, right? All of these resources are available to you while you're an APU student, and probably easier available to you while you're an APU student than after you graduate, right? Because after you graduate, you're going to need to have insurance, or you're going to need to have money in your pocket in order to pay for therapy, right? Like right now, it's free. So come get it, right? If you can give me the next slide, please. I should note though, this isn't a place like to go to the counseling center necessarily. If there's an emergency happening, right? Please call with emergency resources first, right? We are talking about depression. Depression can go with suicide, unfortunately, as we talked about, right? So if somebody like is showing signs of like overdose, right, or somebody's like has literally even just ingested an intoxicating substance already, or is already self-injured in some way, right? If that's you or somebody else, call emergency services first, campus safety or 911, right? And they call us second, right? But let's get the medical services that folks need first, prioritize that, and then the feelings right after, right? This is not going to be too common, but just something to think about and keep an eye on. Next slide, please. I'm not going to break us out into discussion groups because we're already past 2, but I want you to think about all the stuff we talked about today, right? I end all of these lectures this way, right? If you don't do anything with this information, it's not useful to you. I mean, I guess it's useful to you because you get the points for your Core 101 class, or you get the points for your summer system or whatever, but like it'll be useful to your life if you do something with it. So what's one thing you took away? Maybe you really like that pleasant activities thing, right? Maybe this weekend you're going to go do one of those things you talked about with your group, right? Or maybe you can catch yourself the next time you're doing jumping to conclusions, or you're doing all or nothing thinking, right? And push yourself to not do that all the time. Or maybe you like the mindfulness thing, you're going to download a mindfulness app, whatever it is. But take something, do something concrete with what we talked about today. Even if it's call us and schedule an appointment. You can call the counseling center anytime. If you give me the next slide, I think we have the counseling center picture up there. This is where we're at in Magnolia Court in the Shire Mods. So health center is right there on the right. We're right there on the left. basically just keep walking that way past the baseball field and you'll run straight into us, right? So we're available in person, but we're also available over the phone or Zoom because some of you are commuters or some of you don't want to walk all the way over there or whatever. We're happy to do that. I also said our phone number is 24/7, right? So we're open in person from 8:30 to 4:30 weekdays, but like you're not going to have a crisis like during working hours necessarily. So, 2 in the morning on Christmas, give us a call. You'll get the answering machine. It'll say push two to talk to a human. Push two, it'll transfer you right over to our urgent care after hours team. So that's always available for you. Next slide, please. So that covers our coping with sadness and depression. That's what I have for you today. We've got 3 more. So next week, if you want to come for stress and anxiety, you can. We're doing relationship health, both intimate partner relationships and friendship relationships on 11/15. And then right before Thanksgiving, we're going to wrap up with goals and managing time wisely. And then you guys are going to be off for Thanksgiving break. So please come out to those if you'd like to get more SONA credits or if you'd like to attend 4 and get a certificate. We'd love to have you. These workshops are sponsored in part by Project Youth Wellness, which is a great grant. Dr. Rachel Castaneda heads up that team. So if you're interested in any more of their resources, just like Google Project Youth Wellness, or you can scan that QR. But the last thing to put up there that's important, this is our feedback form. So please go ahead and scan the QR, or you can type in the form number 2 with all the random little bits, but I think scanning QR is and the first several questions will be feedback questions for us. We would really love if you would answer those, but make sure you do get all the way to the end and put in your name and your email so that we know to give you your SONA credits or et cetera, whatever you need. And if you encounter any issues with this, always email me. Again, it's N Fernandez or just UCC at APU is also fine, and we'll help you out with it. But thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate y'all. I'll hang out for any questions that people have. Or those of you that are online, if you want to throw them in chat to Jordan, you can whisper them and I can answer them that way as well. But other than that, whenever you're done with the survey, go have a hopefully happy and safe Halloween, and hopefully we'll see you back next week. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.